Unfortunately, the expectation in cycling is that as you get older, you must slow down or lose power. And we can tell you this doesn't have to be true. And this is what makes Lindsay's story today so special. We're not talking about a 50-year-old improving here, or even a 60-year-old. This is a 70-year-old who hasn't progressed in years, who just gained 17 watts with our training structure. In his own words, he said, "I wish I knew this sooner." So today we're going to go through where he was fitness-wise, what the problem was with his training, where he is now, and what we changed to get this improvement. Dad, welcome to another case study episode. Can you take us through a bit of background story about where Lindsay was when he started, what kind of rider he was, and what kind of athlete he was? Because it's a really important starting point.
Yeah, Lindsay's been one of those athletes that I've always admired, mainly because he's always been a really top quality rider, no matter what his age, and it hasn't affected him in a lot of races that he's done. And I've always been interested in, how he's been able to maintain that good level of fitness, and just really understanding that his background when I got to speak to him was he was a real quality runner as a youngster, regularly around the 30 minutes for 10K. And for everybody who knows that, it is very special. So he's got an engine. We know that from that. And he's had a lot of years of training. So he's in his 70s. So he's been training himself for, 50 years. And a lot of the time was as a runner, and more recently, due to injuries, he's turned his hand to riding, and he was, obviously with that engine, he was quite a successful rider. I've known him, for a long time, traveling up to the sunny coast and doing a lot of training up there, and he loves going there as well, as much as I do. So I really got to know him quite well, and it was great that he finally came on board after all those years.
Yeah, I guess to summarize kind of where he's at, what you're saying is he's a super fit athlete, a lot of experience. He knows a lot about training, and he's got serious fitness behind him and in his legs, but he just was stagnant and he just hadn't really progressed on the bike for a long time. And all those years that you'd been seeing him up at Noosa, he was kind of the same rider year in, year out. So what do you think the problem was? What was he doing wrong?
Yeah, and look, it's always hard to find that out without knowing what he was doing over those years. But it seemed to me, and when I actually got to see his training, that he was doing a lot of kilometres, a lot of volume, and a lot of it was too hard. He was doing it, we talk about the 80-20, 80% of your riding should be under zone 2 and 20% above threshold and into VO2 and aerobic training. And he was doing a lot between 75% and 90%. That hard training zone that is good for some sessions, but not every session. And that seemed to be where he was. And so, yes, he had a great level of fitness, but he was not progressing. That was the key. He was unable to do that high intensity jump that was required in some races. He had that engine, he could ride all day at the same pace. But he didn't do any easy sessions, and he didn't really do any hard sessions. He did a lot of the same type of sessions, and there's where his aerobic fitness came from. So really, pinpointing that was the first thing that we really had to change.
Yeah, I think you summarised it really well when you said he just was never fresh enough to train properly. He was just always training hard and always on the limit. And so we take that from where he was to where he is now. I think the best summary that we've said is that he's training less and riding better. He's putting more power out at 70 years old than he has the last few years. And the specific numbers, he's gone from 246 watt FTP test to 263. So that's a 17 watt improvement. And we know how hard every watt is to get. And the fitter you are and the stronger you are and the more experience you have, every watt becomes harder and harder. And again, we made this point at the start, but everyone says that you go backwards with age. But I'd ask you the question, your peak FTP the last few years has been 303 watts or 305. How stoked would you be with a 17 watt improvement after all these years of training?
Oh, that's just a ridiculous improvement. And I've been being told many years that as I get older, I should be dropping my FTP. And for a lot of people, they will accept that challenge. I've been stagnating myself. I could almost do a case study on myself where I've just got 2 or 3 watt improvement here and there, depending on what part of the season I'm at. But Lindsay, with a 17 watt improvement, showed that he had really been valuing his ability for all those years, which probably in hindsight would be a bit disappointing because you shouldn't be able to improve that much in such a short period of time at that level of fitness, and it's astounding. And so just by tweaking less of the same training and more specific training, getting himself down to a zone 2 level training instead of being in zone 3 to zone 3.5. And so lots of zone 2 and zone 1 training and lots of zone 4 and above. And instantly we got huge improvements instantly from a person who is quite fit. And that is something that doesn't happen. We've got examples of all of our top guys who have been training under the program for 4, 5, 6, 7 years, who are ecstatic about 4 watt improvement or 5 watt improvement. So to have someone of similar, looking like similar fitness ability, improving that much, that's extraordinary.
And so let's go through the secret sauce. Everyone always wants to know, what did we do? What did we change? And you just hit 2 nails on the head there. That's we took his more of his riding down to that, from that middle zone to a lot easier and a lot harder at the top end. So can you explain that a little bit? I mean, he was riding a lot of volume at that mid range, 75 to 90% of his FTP.
Yeah, and look, one of the aha moments that we got was when I did a zone 2 ride with Lindsay, and we were actually up at Noosa, heading out to Karoi on that road, for those who know that region well. And we were riding side by side, and every time we came to a rise, Lindsay would put 2 or 3 meters into me, and we were supposed to be side by side talking. And he's having to turn around to keep talking to me. And then as we get to the crest of the rise, I would come back up level with him and then put 10 meters into him as we progressed, on a slight downhill. And he would be saying, "What are you doing? Why are you riding like this?" And I was saying to him, "I'm holding the same power, Lindsay. I'm keeping the pressure on the pedals in zone 2. You're actually, when the hill comes or the gradient increases, you're going outside of zone 2. You're stepping into zone 3. And then when you get to the crest of the hill, you're dropping into zone 1. And so therefore you're doing this surging style of riding, which is okay on a specific session when you're trying to do that. But when you're trying to do pressure on the pedals and keeping it, steady state under zone 2, you're actually not achieving the goal of the session." And he was just saying, "This is amazing. If you hadn't ridden beside me, I would have never have known that." I said, "Yeah, we're meant to be staying together." I said, "For the next 15 minutes, whatever I do, you just stay beside me, shoulder to shoulder." And he just said, "This is incredible." It was like an aha moment for him. And even though he thought he understood what we were trying to get him to do in zone 2, until we actually rode side by side, he didn't understand what he was doing wrong. And that seems a minor point, but if you keep riding like that day in, day out, you're still not getting to ride zone 2 properly.
So that was the first point, was getting him to ride zone 2 properly. And so what do we do with these top end sessions, with these high intensity sessions?
Yeah, well, in the past, because he wasn't using a power meter and he was using perceived exertion, he had really no idea whether he was in the range of zone 4, 5 and 6 or not. And as much as he thought he was pushing himself to his best level, you'll never know with perceived exertion. And that's why the power meter can be such a handy tool. And the minute we tested him with his FTP and gave him his range, he had this big, wide eye-opening experience of, riding to power for the first time, where he thought he was riding correctly on, say an efforts session had 5 efforts. And by the time he got to second and third and fourth effort, he was unable to keep the power in the range because he'd gone too hard in the first effort, which is probably what was happening with his perceived exertion experiences in those training sessions for all those years. And so he quickly learnt that, I need to watch the power and follow it across the 5-minute journey of what power number I should be riding at. And all of a sudden, he started to ride these high-intensity sessions in the right zones, and every one of those 5 efforts was in the right zones. And that's the thing that was enabling him to actually ride harder when it counted. So his improvement would be, obviously, the relationship is huge between riding hard and hard enough as compared to thinking you're riding hard and actually not knowing whether it's hard enough. And that was a really big change.
And what's funny about that, and is almost so ironic, is that his perceived exertion was probably the same before the program and after. These hard sessions probably felt just as hard. But when you're looking at the power, one session is really effective because he's within the range, and the other session is not. And he wasn't able to do those sessions hard enough because his whole training week was hard. And so, yeah, these key changes, or you can see all the dominoes fall, and this is why such a fit, experienced rider can get such improvement. And I really love the example you used of one of the bunch rides you did with him. And like you said, you've known Lindsay a lot of years, but never actually coached him, and then finally got the chance to coach him. And then 2 or 3 months in, you go on this bunch ride up in Noosa again. And can you explain what happened?
Yeah, look, that's a great story. But just before we move on to that, he mentioned to me how much he was enjoying those interval sessions because he actually had feedback. That was the other thing. He loves data, but he really didn't have data to use because he had no idea whether he's doing those hard sessions before, good or bad. And now he was getting this feedback to say, you nailed all those sessions. And he was excited to try next week to try and match those or improve those. But the story I wanted to tell was that we do this Thursday bunch ride out to Boreen Point, and on the way out, it's pretty social. And on the way back, it's really, everybody going flat out and attacking. And it's pretty much, a hard 15, 20-minute effort all the way home, as hard as you can. And there's only a few guys who can really contribute to keeping the pace high. A lot of young guys there are really quality bike riders. And a lot of the rest of the bunch is just hanging on, single file. And that day, Lindsay was rolling turns with these young guys, and you couldn't wipe the smile off his face. He'd done that ride a lot, and he hadn't really ridden like that for I don't know, he's been going up there for 20 years. Probably 20 years ago, he was probably able to roll turns. But, when we got back to the coffee shop, there was a couple of comments saying, Lindsay, that was pretty impressive, mate. And I'm telling everybody sitting there, you do realise he's now 70, and here he is, rolling turns. And they're the enjoyable parts as a coach, that you see a guy firsthand experiencing an improvement as he's getting older, rather than the expected decrease in performance as you get older. And he's an example of doing some really exact training and getting the improvement, rather than please can you keep me at the same level as I get older? Well, no, we're not going to be satisfied with that. We actually want to get better as we get older, and he's not the only example of this.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great way to finish. And he's an example of FTP improvement, but not everyone has to improve their FTP. You can improve in a whole lot of ways with cycling, and that can come from your ability to hold that FTP for longer, or it depends on your strengths and weaknesses, but the point is that you don't have to let age limit you from improving your ability on the bike. So that's a great way to finish. It's a great case study. It's a great story. We hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you in the next episode.